10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 211. Hey everybody, welcome back into yet another episode of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. My name is Nick Manella. I am the creator and host of this show, and I've been with you for 211 episodes at this point. So if you're brand new to the show, welcome in. If you are a returning listener, thank you so much for tuning in again. Before we jump into the show, our tune of the month, where we write an etude that is based off of the concepts we've been going over this month. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping. So the first thing I want to do is give a big shout out to the new Patreon members. If you're not sure what Patreon is, that is how we keep this podcast in business. Our fantastic listeners have chosen to give us $3 a month to keep this podcast coming out each and every week. And in return for that $3 donation, you do get a PDF to every single episode that we ever put out. So we've got some brand new members this week. Thank you to Barbara, Roy, and Ioka, or Ioka. I'm sorry if I butchered that name. But thank you guys so much for signing up, joining up, and making sure that this podcast keeps going. If you would like to sign up and donate your $3 a month to the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, you can go to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, go over, get yourself signed up, and you get instant access to all those materials. And thank you so much to everybody out there. All right, let's jump into today's episode. So today I chose one of my favorite jazz standards to write the etude of the month over. Now, as you all know, we've been talking about jazz articulation this month, so that's what everything is going to be based off of. So the standard is Yesterdays by Jerome Kern. And I love this tune because it has such a variety of harmony in such a small package. It's only a 16-measure tune. It's in the key of concert D minor, but it also goes to the relative major, and it just has a lot of interesting chords. We see the circle of fourths utilized a lot. We see major chords. We see minor chords. We even see descending roots in part of this. So make sure you check out Yesterdays before you go and play this month's etude. Learn the melody. Start to get used to this tune before you jump into the etude. So let's talk about some of the concepts that are going into the particular written material over this week. So quick recap of what we've talked about. We've talked about the fact that when you have a long run of eighth notes, you should be connecting those. You should be making them very legato sounding. And that holds true until the last note in a phrase where we want to use more of a marcato accent. Then we followed up that episode by talking about mixing in some short notes for effect to sort of break up your phrases, make them more interesting, keeping the listener on the edge of their seat. And then in last week's episode, we really talked about the importance of the offbeat accent and how much that is going to make our lines swing and really give us that characteristic jazz sound. So what we did in this etude, it's 3 choruses over Yesterdays, and we tried to touch on a little bit of everything. So let me give you a quick rundown of how I approached writing these 3 choruses. So I decided to go from the least adventurous to the most adventurous. And that's kind of how I would structure my solo when I'm improvising. We need something to keep our solos interesting all the way through, or else the listener is going to tune out. So what you'll notice in the first chorus is that I keep everything pretty straightforward. Any eighth note lines that I'm playing, I'm using that legato sound with the marcato accent at the end of phrases. So I'm not really branching out too far. I'm really just keeping things kind of at home. Now, one thing that I will say is that the offbeat accent principle that we talked about is present throughout. And that's not something that I actually wrote into the etude. You know, it's not something that I emphasize because that's something that you should be trying to do at all times. All right. Now, what I also didn't do is when we got into a run of eighth notes, I did not mark each one of them legato, because that's also something that you should be kind of doing without thinking about it. And if you're not to that point yet, that's okay. Keep studying, keep practicing, and eventually you'll get to that point where you don't even have to think about it. You'll just be doing it as a general way of playing. So let me play the first chorus of the etude, and you're going to hear it's pretty in bounds, meaning that I'm not really doing much to mix up those general principles. Those principles being the offbeat accent and that general legato style for runs of eighth notes. So here's the first chorus. So you can hear I'm just really relying on, my good old basic stuff there to make that one sound swinging. So now as I move into the second chorus, what you're going to notice is I start to inject some of those staccato notes in the middle of my eighth note lines. And these are very measured. I thought about these a lot. And the thing about that is at first you're not going to be able to pull this off on the fly. So maybe you write some of your own eighth note lines and you try injecting some of these staccato notes in the middle. It's going to be a lot of trial and error. You're going to put some in there that really sound bad. And then you're going to have to go back and rethink where you want to put those things in. Where are they going to sound the best? It's just like everything with the trial and error style of doing this. And that's also something that's really important to me in my process for writing these etudes for you. You guys only hear the finished product, but I go back and I change a lot of stuff, because I'm committing this to paper and it's something that you guys are going to use as an educational tool. So there's a lot of trial and error. Anybody who thinks I write these in one pass, I don't. I really don't. Different than soloing. In soloing, you only get one pass. But since I'm putting these down on paper and they're going to live on in the hands of my students out there, I want to make sure that they sound great. So you should approach that same thing when you're learning a new concept in your own playing. All right, I got off on a little bit of a tangent there. Let's check out the second chorus and listen for some of these staccatos and look for some of these staccatos on the PDF and kind of think to yourself, why did I put them in there? Do you like them? Do you hate them? Is it a place where you would have put them in there? Is it not a place where you would have used them? It's all subjective, but here is my attempt at starting to inject some different textures into my lines. So it really does change the sound of the whole thing, changes the texture of the whole thing. It conveys a completely different feeling when I'm playing it like that. Now, the third chorus is a lot of the same. I'm kind of thinking the same things, but I'm trying to be even a little bit more adventurous with this in the third chorus. Again, I'm really just using articulation. That's it. I'm using all my normal harmonic language. I'm not trying to do anything super outrageous. I'm really trying to focus on the length of notes and how that conveys a certain feeling to you. So let's check out the third chorus. And I also want you to realize that I am using that offbeat accent style throughout this. Even when I'm messing with the different articulations, that's kind of the one thing that stays constant in my playing at all times. So let's check out the third chorus. Alright, so that's it. That's the entire etude. Tried to get a little bit adventurous there at the end, but really go through and try to play this exactly as I've written it on the page. I think that's where the most benefit is going to come from as far as experimenting with these different articulations. I hope you enjoyed this series on articulations. It was something that somebody asked about when I put out a poll on what we should do for topics. I think it was Jenny actually that mentioned this one. So thanks, Jenny, for the suggestion. I'm going to try to get to a bunch of the other suggestions from that group. If you haven't made a suggestion and you want me to cover something, that post is still over there on the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Community Facebook group. So drop in and leave an answer, and I will try to address as many of those as possible. Remember, you can grab this PDF and the PDF to every single episode that we've ever done. We do them in concert pitch, B flat, E flat, and bass clef. So you can grab those at our Patreon site, 10minutejazzlesson.com. Click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up, $3 a month. All right, I'm going to leave you by playing the entire etude, all three choruses, all the way through, to give you a sense of the continuity that comes from increasing the injection of these different articulation patterns. Hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody. Thank you.